against the windshield, each drop a tiny hammer blow against the thin barrier between us and the absolute darkness. My knuckles were white, clutching the steering wheel as if it were the last lifeline in a churning ocean. The GPS, usually my reliable guide, had gone silent, its cheerful voice replaced by a flat, dead screen. And then I saw it. Not a trick of the light, not a splash of water, but a figure, standing dead center in the middle of this forgotten road, illuminated for a terrifying split second by my high beams. A woman, dressed in white, her hair plastered to her face, dripping, and her eyes were just black voids. I swerved, the tires screaming in protest as the car fishtailed. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure terror. I barely managed to regain control, the car lurching back onto the sodden asphalt. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her still standing there, a ghostly sentinel. Nothing, just the endless black, swallowing the faint glow of my taillights. What the hell was that? My voice hoarse. My hands were shaking so badly I had to consciously force them to grip the wheel. I tried to rationalize it. A deer? Maybe? Someone playing a sick joke? But the image of those blank, hollow eyes was seared into my mind. This was just the beginning of the nightmare that unfolded on that cursed night. It had all started so innocently. A last-minute decision to drive up to my parents' cabin for the weekend. A chance to escape the city, clear my head. The drive usually took about 3 hours, mostly highway, then a winding country road for the last stretch. I'd left later than planned, around 9 p.m., thinking I'd beat the morning traffic and enjoy the solitude of a night drive. I loved night drives. The world asleep, the road empty, just me and the hum of the engine. Tonight, however, felt different. An oppressive silence seemed to press in from all sides, a heavy blanket that muffled even the sound of my own breathing. The first hint that something was amiss came about an hour into the drive. My phone, usually buzzing with notifications, no signal, not even for emergency calls. I shrugged it off. It happens sometimes in certain areas. But then, the radio started to act up. Static, then snippets of what sounded like an old gospel choir, followed by a voice, deep and guttural, that wasn't speaking English, or any language I recognized. I quickly switched it off, preferring the silence to that unsettling cacophony. As I veered off the main highway onto the smaller country road, the rain began. A soft drizzle at first, then escalating into the downpour that now hammered my car. The turnoff for the cabin was a familiar landmark, a gnarled old oak tree, its branches reaching like skeletal fingers towards the sky. But when I got there, the turnoff was gone, vanished, replaced by an unbroken line of dense, dark woods. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at my skin. I must have missed it. Impossible. I'd driven this road 100 times. I decided to go a little further, thinking perhaps the landmark had been moved or obscured. That's when the GPS died. And then, the figure in the road. After the adrenaline surge began to subside, a new, chilling thought crept in. What if I hadn't swerved in time? What if I had hit her? The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. I couldn't just leave her there, whoever or whatever she was. Despite the bone-deep terror, a flicker of humanity, or perhaps just morbid curiosity, compelled me. I had to go back, my hands still trembling. I made a U-turn, the headlights cutting through the inky blackness. I drove slowly, my eyes scanning the road, my heart pounding a relentless rhythm against my ribs. There was no sign of her. No body, no crumpled white dress, nothing. It was as if she had simply dissolved into the rain-swept night. Just as I was about to give up and drive away, a faint light flickered in the distance, nestled amongst the trees. It wasn't the welcoming glow of my parents' cabin. This light was a sickly yellow, pulsating erratically, like a dying ember. Against my better judgment, I felt an irresistible pull towards it. It was the only sign of human presence in this desolate, rain-soaked landscape. I parked the car, leaving the engine running, a desperate escape route if needed. Armed with a shaky flashlight, I pushed through the dripping undergrowth, the beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. The light grew stronger, leading me to a clearing I'd never seen before. In the center stood an old, dilapidated shack, its windows boarded up, its porch sagging precariously. The yellow light emanated from a single, grimy window on the side. As I approached, a low, guttural chanting became audible, seeping from within the shack. It was the same sound I'd heard on the radio. My blood ran cold. Every instinct screamed at me to turn and run, to get back in my car and drive as far away as possible. But another, darker impulse, a twisted curiosity, held me captive. I crept closer, pressing my ear against the rotting wood of the shack. The chanting grew louder, joined now by a rhythmic thudding sound, like something being dragged across a rough floor. And then, a woman's scream, sharp and agonizing, echoed from inside. It was cut short, abruptly, replaced by a chilling silence, broken only by the persistent, guttural chanting. My breath hitched in my throat. I stumbled backward, tripping over a gnarled root and landing hard on the wet ground. The flashlight flew from my hand, its beam extinguished as it hit the mud. Panic, pure and unadulterated, seized me. I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing, screaming at me to escape. But as I turned to run, a cold skeletal hand clamped down on my shoulder. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up. A low, raspy whisper slithered into my ear, a voice that seemed to come from beyond the grave. "You shouldn't have come back." I didn't dare to look. My eyes were fixed on the impenetrable darkness ahead, desperately trying to discern a path, any path, out of this nightmare. The grip on my shoulder tightened, and I felt a sharp, burning pain. Then, a sudden, blinding flash of light exploded from the shack, followed by a deafening roar that shook the very ground beneath me. I fell again, my ears ringing, my head swimming. When I finally managed to push myself up, the shack was engulfed in flames, a towering inferno that cast grotesque shadows against the rain-slicked trees. The chanting had stopped. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and something else, something metallic and sickening, and the hand on my shoulder was gone. I didn't wait. I ran, blindly, frantically, through the woods, towards where I thought I'd left my car. Branches whipped at my face. Roots snagged at my feet, but I didn't stop, didn't look back. I just ran, driven by an primal fear that had consumed every fiber of my being. I burst out of the tree line, and there it was, my car, still running, its headlights cutting through the rain. I practically dove inside, fumbling with the lock, my hands still shaking uncontrollably. I slammed the door shut, locking it with a desperate click. I threw the car into reverse, tires spitting gravel, and sped away, not caring which direction I was going, just needing to be anywhere but there. I drove for what felt like hours, the image of the burning shack, the black-eyed woman, and the chilling whisper replaying in a horrifying loop in my mind. The rain finally began to subside, giving way to a pale, pre-dawn light. The world slowly began to emerge from the darkness, no longer a shadowy, menacing landscape, but a familiar, if still unsettling, rural scene. I eventually found my way back to the main highway, my sanity barely clinging by a thread. I pulled into the first gas station I saw, a small, brightly lit beacon in the receding night. The attendant, a sleepy-eyed young man, looked at me with concern. "Rough night, huh, ma'am?" he asked, noticing my disheveled appearance and wide, haunted eyes. I just nodded, unable to speak. I filled my tank, my gaze darting nervously to the dark woods that lined the road, half expecting to see those black eyes staring back at me. As I paid, I noticed a local newspaper on the counter. The headlines screamed in bold black letters: "Mysterious fire destroys old hermit's shack. Remains found." My blood ran cold. The image of the burning shack, the metallic smell. I remembered the scream, abruptly cut short. Had I witnessed something unspeakable? Was the woman in white connected to the hermit? My mind reeled with unanswered questions, each more terrifying than the last. I drove home in a daze, the rising sun doing little to dispel the shadows that still clung to my soul. I tried to dismiss it all as a bad dream, a product of exhaustion and an overactive imagination. But the memory of the cold, skeletal hand on my shoulder, the whisper in my ear, and the chilling headline in the newspaper refused to be silenced. I never drove that road at night again, and every time it rains and the darkness presses I can still see those black, hollow eyes, a haunting reminder of the night I encountered the unimaginable. Some roads, it seems, are best left untraveled after dark, and some horrors, once glimpsed, never truly let you go. My friend Mark, a hardened, long-haul truck driver, scoffed when I told him my story. "Supernatural nonsense, Sarah. Probably just a hallucination from being overtired, or some local kids pulling a prank." He was a man of logic, of concrete facts. He'd seen his share of strange things on the road, but always attributed them to explainable phenomena. Bad weather, faulty equipment, or just the bizarre behavior of people. "You just haven't driven the right road yet, Mark," I countered, a shiver running down my spine at the memory. He just laughed. "Give me enough coffee and a full tank, and I'll drive through any haunted road you throw at me." Famous last words. A few months later, Mark called me, his voice not the usual booming laugh, but a low, shaken whisper. "Sarah," he began, "you're not going to believe what happened." I braced myself, a knot forming in my stomach. He was on a routine delivery run, heading across state lines. It was late, past midnight, and he was pushing through a particularly desolate stretch of highway. He'd been feeling unusually tired, despite downing 2 energy drinks. His eyelids felt heavy, his vision occasionally blurring. He knew he should pull over, but he was so close to his destination. Suddenly, his headlights caught something in the distance. A car, completely engulfed in flames, pulled off to the side of the road. It wasn't just burning. It was an inferno, black smoke billowing into the night sky. He slowed down, preparing to call emergency services, his blood running cold at the sight. But as he got closer, he saw a figure standing beside the burning wreck. A man, dressed in a pristine suit, completely unfazed by the raging fire just feet away. The man wasn't moving, just standing there, watching the flames consume the vehicle. Mark, ever the good Samaritan, pulled his rig over, grabbing his fire extinguisher. "Hey, are you okay? Is anyone else in there?" he shouted, rushing towards the man. The man slowly turned his head. His face was devoid of expression, his eyes fixed on Mark with an unsettling intensity. He didn't speak, just raised a single, gloved hand and pointed towards the burning car. Mark followed his gaze, expecting to see a victim trapped inside. Instead, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Reflected in the flames, on the smoldering dashboard of the burning car, was a small, framed photograph. It was a picture of Mark, a younger Mark, smiling, holding a trophy from a local trucking competition. He stumbled backward, a gasp escaping his lips. His mind screamed for an explanation, but there was none. How could his picture be in that car? And who was this man? The man in the suit took a step closer, and in the eerie glow of the flames, Mark noticed something else. The man's feet weren't quite touching the ground. They seemed to float, suspended inches above the asphalt. And then, a faint, metallic scent like burning copper, filled the air. "You shouldn't be here." The man's voice was a low, resonant rumble, echoing from somewhere deep within his chest. It wasn't accusatory, but rather a statement of undeniable fact. "This isn't your stop." Just as Mark was about to scream, a flash of bright blue light erupted from the burning car, momentarily blinding him. He threw an arm over his eyes, stumbling backwards. When he lowered his arm, the car was gone. The man was gone. The only evidence left was a lingering smell of smoke and a scorched patch on the side of the road. Mark didn't stop driving until the sun was high in the sky, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He called me from a rest stop, his voice still trembling, recounting the terrifying encounter. "I don't know what I saw, Sarah," he admitted, "but I know what I felt. Pure, unadulterated fear. And that picture, my picture." His voice trailed off, lost in the horror of the memory. "You drove the wrong road, Mark," I said, my own voice barely a whisper. "Some things out there, they're not explainable. They're just there." He agreed. He never scoffed at my story again. He even started avoiding certain roads, opting for longer routes if it meant steering clear of any desolate, forgotten stretches of highway after dark. The experience had changed him, chipped away at his logical, unshakable facade. He now understood that some horrors don't need an explanation. They just need to be survived. And sometimes, even surviving leaves an indelible mark. My final story isn't mine, nor Mark's, but one whispered among truckers and late-night dispatchers, a chilling urban legend that has taken on the undeniable weight of truth. It's the tale of the phantom hitchhiker, but with a sinister twist that makes it far more terrifying than the typical roadside ghost story. It concerns a young woman, let's call her Clara, an aspiring journalist who was driving cross-country for a new job. She was ambitious, a little naive, and excited for her new beginning. She decided to drive through the night to make good time, fueled by coffee and the thrill of a new adventure. She was on a long, deserted stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere when her car suddenly sputtered and died. She was stranded. No cell service, no other cars in sight. Panic began to set in. After about an hour of futile attempts to restart her engine, she saw headlights approaching in the distance. A wave of relief washed over her. As the vehicle drew closer, she saw it was an old, beat-up pickup truck, rusty and creaking. Not ideal, but desperate times. The truck pulled up beside her. The driver, a gruff-looking man with a weathered face and a baseball cap pulled low, eyed her suspiciously. "Trouble, darling?" he asked, his voice gravelly. Clara explained her predicament, asking if he could give her a ride to the nearest town, which she vaguely remembered was about 20 miles up the road. The man hesitated, his eyes still scanning her up and down. Finally, he grunted, "Hop in, but I ain't going much further than the turnoff for the old sawmill." Grateful. Clara quickly got into the passenger seat, throwing her small backpack in the back. The truck rumbled to life, and they set off into the night. The silence in the cab was thick, broken only by the engine's roar and the occasional squeak of the aging suspension. Clara tried to make polite conversation, but the driver was monosyllabic, offering only grunts and nods in response. About 10 minutes into the ride, Clara started to feel uneasy. The man kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, a strange, almost predatory glint in his eyes. She clutched her backpack, her heart beginning to pound. Then, she noticed something in the side mirror. In the reflection, she saw a second figure in the back of the truck. A woman, dressed in a long, tattered white dress, her hair tangled and wild. Her face was obscured by shadow, but Clara could make out her posture, hunched over, as if in pain or sorrow. Clara's blood ran cold. She hadn't seen anyone else get into the truck. She hadn't even heard a sound. She quickly turned her head to look over her shoulder. The back of the truck was empty. Just her backpack and the dark, empty road beyond. She looked back in the side mirror. The woman was still there, now seemingly closer, her head slowly lifting. Clara gasped, her breath catching in her throat. The woman's face was gaunt, her skin a sickly gray. Her eyes were wide, staring, filled with an ancient, unbearable sorrow. And then, her lips parted, and she silently mouthed a single word. Run. Terror, cold and absolute, gripped Clara. She knew, instinctively, that this was no ordinary hitchhiker. This was a warning. She glanced at the driver. He was staring straight ahead, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, a faint, chilling smirk playing on his lips. He knew, without thinking. Clara fumbled for the door handle. The truck was still moving, but not at a breakneck speed. It was her only chance. She yanked the handle, threw the door open, and leapt out, hitting the hard asphalt with a sickening thud. Pain exploded through her body as she tumbled, scraping her hands and knees. She scrambled to her feet, ignoring the searing pain, and looked back at the truck. It hadn't stopped. It continued down the road, the shadowy figure of the woman still visible in the side mirror, now turning to face Clara, her hand slowly lifting in a silent goodbye. The driver didn't even slow down. Clara ran, adrenaline coursing through her veins, pushing past the pain, past the fear. She ran until her lungs burned, until she thought her legs would give out. She didn't know where she was going, just away from that truck, away from the phantom warning. She was eventually found by a kind family, driving home from an early morning fishing trip. They saw her, bruised and battered, stumbling along the side of the road in the pre-dawn light. They took her to the nearest hospital, where she was treated for her injuries and severe shock. When she recounted her story, the local sheriff, a stoic man who had seen too much in his career, listened intently. He didn't scoff. He didn't dismiss. He just nodded slowly. "There's an old tale," he began, his voice low, "about a woman who was murdered on that stretch of road decades ago. Her body was never found. They say she wanders the highway, a silent protector, warning those in danger." He paused, his gaze fixed on Clara. "And there's another tale," he continued, "about a man who sometimes picks up stranded travelers in an old pickup. They say he drives them to an abandoned sawmill, and they're never seen again. Clara never took that job. She never drove at night again. The trauma of that night, the spectral warning, and the silent, knowing malevolence of the driver had carved a permanent scar into her soul. She learned a terrifying lesson that night. Some roads are cursed. Some figures are not what they seem. And sometimes, the most terrifying thing you can encounter in the dead of night isn't a ghost, but the living, breathing darkness of another human being. And sometimes, the ghosts are the ones trying to save you. So, the next time you're driving alone on a deserted road, the darkness pressing in, and you see something inexplicable, something that defies all logic, remember these stories. Remember the black-eyed woman, the burning car with the impossible photograph, and the silent, phantom hitchhiker. Because out there, beyond the reach of street lights and cell service, the night holds secrets, and sometimes, those secrets are just waiting for you to drive by.